Hey, yo, light the beam, fam. Shout out to the Kings for finally snapping their 16-year playoff drought. 16 years is crazy. 16 years was, if I'm not mistaken, puts us in 2007. I wasn't even watching basketball in 2007. 16 years ago, I'm 13 years old. Like, I really wasn't even watching the NBA. So shout out to the Kings. Shout out to the moves that they made last offseason. Last offseason and last season at the trade deadline, trading for Sabonis, adding Kevin Huerter, drafting Keegan Murray, hiring Mike Brown as the head coach, who I think deservedly should be. If he doesn't get coach of the year, he's got to be the first runner-up. A beautiful season from the Kings. I'm going to keep it a beam. I was wrong. And it's been documented over the channel over the last season, over this past season. So I'm not going to go crazy into it, but I was wrong on the Kings. I wasn't one of the people who said that the Sabonis Halliburton trade was completely wrong, but I definitely was like, dag, I wish there was a world where y'all can keep Halliburton, because I knew Halliburton was going to be nice. And I'll keep it a beam. I didn't think Sabonis would be an all-star out west. I definitely thought they weren't going to be an all-star, because Kings fans are like, we traded for all-star, we traded for all-star. I'm like, he ain't gonna be an all-star out west. You know what West Conference got? Not only was Sabonis an all-star, Fox was an all-star too. And I don't have my all-NBA list solidified yet, but Sabonis and Fox, if not both, at least one of them need to be on the all-NBA team. I don't have my list finished yet, but if not both, at least one of them need to be on the all-NBA team. I'm looking at Sabonis for that third all-NBA spot, and Fox, quiet as kept, he might be first or second team at the lowest. But shout out to the Kings. Snap the playoffs drought. Now, I want to say they're third in the Western Conference. I want to say Memphis, took that second spot back from them. But still, crazy impressive. Absolutely crazy impressive. Shout out to the Kings. That wasn't even in my notes, but right before I hit record, I was like, oh yeah, the Kings snapped their drought last night with that win over Portland. We got to show some love to the Kings at the top of the show. All right, first real thing on the docket. I want to talk about Jrue Holiday because he just went crazy for 51 points last night against the Pacers. He was 20 for 30 from the field, 3 for 6 from 3, 8 assists, 8 boards. Now, the Bucks, we all know the Bucks are amazing, right? I think it's understood by now. The Bucks, to me, as much as I love my Sixers, to me, the Bucks are still my favorite to make it out of the Eastern Conference. Like, if I had to decide that I'm putting, $1 million on somebody, I'm putting $1 million on the Bucks. If I have to do it, the Bucks are my pick. I'm rooting for my Sixers, but the Bucks are the pick. And the reason is, yes, we know Giannis, rightfully so, is Giannis, in my mind, still the conversation for best player in the league, probably still the best player in the league. Don't really know how the MVP conversation has shifted to just Joel and Jokic. To me, Giannis is a legit third candidate, but it's more so looking like lately it's Joel and Giannis going at it, and then, Joel and Jokic going at it, and then Giannis is kind of like that next tier for when it comes to MVP. To me, it really is a true three-way race. I think people just like the optics of Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, two centers actually going at it for MVP. Cool storyline, but whatever. Giannis is playing absolutely amazing. The Bucks are playing beautiful. But the biggest thing, and one of the reasons I want to talk about it, because we saw it last night in this Pacers games at 51 from Jrue, the level of play we've seen from Jrue Holiday this season, we've always known Jrue is like literally one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, if not the best. The best guards in the league have always said, when you ask them who's the toughest, who guards you the best, who's the toughest defender in the league, Jrue Holiday's name comes up time after time after time again. Consistently over basically throughout his career, he's been known as a great defender. And his reputation offensively, at least with his time with the Bucks, has been he's solid, but there may be some times where he's a little bit inconsistent. There may be times if Middleton's not necessarily having a good game, he can't always pick up the slack. But this season, with Middleton being out for most of the season, for reference, Middleton has only played in 30 out of the Bucks' 76 games so far. He has been phenomenal. Jrue Holiday has been phenomenal offensively for them. 19 points a game, most of his points since he's been a Buck. 47% from the field, 38% from three on 6 attempts a game, which is the most attempts, 3-point attempts in his career. And the biggest thing is, while those numbers aren't crazy, 47% from the field is still good, but it ain't groundbreaking, record-breaking numbers. Don't get me wrong here. But what I'm seeing from him on the court is just the confidence level, the consistency in the offense, of being able to be that legit second option for the Bucks on a night-to-night basis. With Chris in and out of the lineup, they have looked to Jrue to step up offensively to give some more offensive firepower to this team to help Giannis, score the basketball. And it reminds me a lot, and I was thinking of this basically for the past couple of weeks, because I talked about this at length last season, how much I loved the development of Aaron Gordon for the Denver Nuggets, with them not playing with MPJ, and them not playing with Jamal Murray. He stepped up to be their basically second go-to scorer, their second guy, playing alongside Jokic last season, and we're seeing the benefits of it this year. He's always in the right spot when Jokic, he cuts very well around Jokic. He moves up without the ball well around Jokic, and he's just improved his offensive confidence with playing with the Nuggets. I love what he's doing with the Nuggets right now. And I've seen something very similar with Tyrese Maxey last year. When Ben Simmons was still on the team, he wasn't playing before we traded for James Harden. Maxey stepped up to be that basically lead guard for the Sixers, to be that number 2 guy and turn into a 20-point per game scorer, and really stepped up a lot for the Sixers. I'm seeing that again this year with Drew. What Drew was doing, what Drew used to be, was still solid. Don't get me wrong. Drew was never trash. Drew was never a bum, anything like that. Drew was always solid offensively. He was that good offensively. But it was an inconsistent good offensively, because at times, if he's not having it, it's like, well, I mean, they still got Chris, they still got Giannis, they still got shooters, like, go from there. But with Chris being out, Drew Holiday time and time again has stepped up big for the Bucks. And last night we saw that with 51. Absolutely insane from him. Also, just want to shout out the Bucks in general, because they just have a really good team. Y'all know I love Bobby Portis. I ain't even gonna talk about it. Y'all know I love Bobby Portis. Javon Carter's having a really, really good season. He makes plays with effort, and he's shooting well, 42% on 4 attempts a game. Brook Lopez, I mean, do we have to say more? He's likely, I don't know if it's not set in stone yet, but he's, in my mind, likely to win Defensive Player of the Year this year. He's been absolutely phenomenal. The way he's allowed them to play like really good drop coverage and force teams to, shoot a lot of contested mid-range shots. He's using his length to contest. Drew Holiday fighting over screens to contest. He's like, I call him, and I literally have it written down, a defensive hub for the Bucks, meaning he can protect the rim. He's good in the pick and roll, at least solid in the pick and roll and the drop coverage they play. But what he brings to this Bucks team defensively allows him, and Drew really, allows Giannis to play a lot of free safety and, help side blocks and, double teams and stuff like that, get extra rebounds. It allows Giannis to kind of play free safety and just roam around defensively. If Chris Middleton can get it together, and because he's been playing well, what I mean by get it together is getting back at least as close as possible to what we're used to. I don't think he's going to get back to all-star level Chris Middleton, by playoffs. I just don't think there's enough time yet. He still looks a little shaky at times. But over the last month, he's looked a little bit better. Over the last couple of weeks, he has looked better. He's looked more consistent. Like I said earlier, he's only played in 30 out of the 76 games this season. He started in 16 of them. If he can put it together come playoffs, even if he's playing at the level he's playing at, I really, if I had to bet, would bet on the Bucks to make it out of the East. But if he can put it together, it's a wrap. It really is a wrap. But I wanted to shout out specifically Drew. Shout out to the Bucks, and really shout out to Drew Holiday, because he stepped up big for them this season, and I'm loving what I'm seeing from him. All right, next up, it wouldn't be right if I didn't talk about my Sixers. I don't apologize for it. I'm a Sixers fan. I'm not apologizing for talking about my Sixers. So we just won last night over Dallas. Harden had a really, really bad game shooting-wise. He was 15 points, 4 for 14, 2 for 6 from the 3, 12 assists. Harden's making me nervous, right? We had this news break, I guess maybe about a week ago, that he was dealing with some Achilles soreness is what they're calling it. Something to do with his calf, Achilles soreness. It makes you go, let's not tear this Achilles. It makes you worry a lot when they start throwing around Achilles and soreness and pain and lower body pain and strain and sprain when it comes to James Harden. We know when it comes to his legs in the playoffs, they like to give out on him. I'm praying that's not what happens. But he's only played in 3 of the Sixers' last 8 games, all because of these lower body, Achilles, calf, injury, pain, discomfort, whatever you want to call it. But in those 3 games, it was a loss against the Bulls. He had 5 points, was 2 for 14, 0 for 6 from 3, 12 assists. And then a win against the Hornets, where he had 11 points, 4 for 15 from the field, 0 for 6 from 3, 10 assists. Now, what's clear to me is James Harden going to play make. He's going to get us these assists because he's going to be in the pick and roll. He's going to feed Joel. He's going to find Maxey on the fast break. And that's all good and dandy. Like, You're going to get assists. That's cool. But you have to score, James. For the Sixers to do what I believe the Sixers can do, for the Sixers to do what Philly fans believe the Sixers can do, James Harden, you got to be a 20 and 10 guy. You can't be an 11 and 12 guy. No, 20 and 10. Because when he go 11 for 12, we're going to lose that game by 5. You know what I'm saying? If he give us 11 points, we lose by 5. If he gives us 20, it's like, oh, we won by 8. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's really how it can go for the Sixers. He has to be aggressive. He has to be able to score. Hopefully, whatever this stuff is with his leg is figured out by playoffs, and he's feeling a bit better by the time playoffs starts. But I'm still, other than that, I'm still liking what I'm seeing for my Sixers. It was a back and forth game with Dallas for the most part, but in the fourth quarter, Philly locks in. Philly this season has closed games fairly well. It's a big thing that I've seen from Joel. I want to say in the last week's episode that Joel has gotten a little bit better, and I was able to really put my mind to it and think about what I mean by that. What he's gotten better at is how he conducts himself in the fourth. He can slow the game down. He asks for the ball. He demands the ball. He got his 2 clutch buckets. I want to say the score was tied around 1-on-1 to 1-on-1, or we might have been down 3. Joel Embiid clocked in with about 7 minutes to go. When the fourth, scores 2 points in a row, then gets a clutch block to end out the game. And basically, when the Dallas seemed like they might have been going on a run, Luka beat his man. Embiid comes over for the help, gets the easy block, not necessarily easy block, but gets the great block, defensive stop, and we end up winning that game. And it was also in that moment, because I'm on Xbox. I think I was on Xbox with the guys talking about this, or I might have been watching the TikTok. I don't remember where this idea came to me. But people were saying, it was somebody saying, talking about Doc Rivers as a coach, and saying, yeah, Philly got that genius mind that is Doc Rivers. And I really had to sit and think about it for a while. And I was like, yo, everybody calls Doc Rivers this amazing mind, this amazing basketball savant, and this great head coach. We saw, I guess it was earlier in the season, ESPN put out, I want to say it was ESPN, I might be wrong, put out like this top 5 coaches of all time list, and Doc was on it. And I was like, what is going on here? Because as a Sixers fan, it's well documented that Sixers fans have a love-hate relationship with Doc. And I said, well, what is it that we don't like about Doc? He doesn't call timeouts when other teams are going on a run to kind of slow the game down and get his team in order and, go from there. Like, he doesn't stop the bleeding with a timeout. His rotations have gotten better. I will say that. When he first got to Philly, he was doing platoon swaps like it was hockey. He was literally swapping whole lineups at timeouts. And I think I realized why. He's used to playing with amazing floor generals. Think about it. He's coached Rondo for years in Boston. And then he coached CP3 for years in LA. Both of those guys are amazing floor generals. Those are guys who control the pace of the game. True on-court coaches. You feel me? No disrespect to James Harden. I love what he's doing, lead the league in assists per game. But to me, when I watch the games, James Harden isn't necessarily a on-court coach. He's just an amazing playmaker, and he's going to make the right pass to get the ball to the man that's open and then put him in a position to score. But not necessarily the guy who's going to be like, yo, slow it down. Like, let's take a breath. Like, Chris Paul does it all the time. Rondo did it all the time, where they literally be like, hey, this is getting out of hand. Let's slow it down. Let's create something. Sometimes Joel does that, but it's not necessarily the same because you got to feed him in the post. Doc is used to playing with on-court coaches, and he doesn't have that in Harden. And sometimes when I think he should be the one calling a timeout to gather the team and get it together, I think maybe in his head, he's like, well, Harden's got it because he's used to Chris Paul having it or Rajon Rondo having it, and it's just not there. One thing I can say about Doc, though, to give him his flowers, and then we're going to move on. He's amazing in out of timeout plays, ATOs, after timeout plays. Absolutely amazing. He's a great mind when it comes to drawing up a play. He's been doing it since his days in Boston. He's an absolutely phenomenal after timeout coach and drawing plays, which is part of the reason of my frustration of I wish you would call more timeouts to stop the bleeding, because if you did call a timeout, I almost guarantee you we're going to score. But moving on from the Sixers, y'all ain't here to hear about them. Real quick on the Mavs, shout out Jason Kidd. That zone in the third quarter was smooth. It was just a moment. I was like, oh, Jason Kidd doing a little something different, because I was hard on Kidd a couple weeks ago as well. He had a moment where I was like, okay, this is some nice coaching here. And once again, Kyrie and Luka, beautiful offensively. Surprisingly, though, the Mavs was solid. For most of that game, the Mavs looked solid because the other guys was making shots. But when the game slowed down in the fourth, they struggled a little bit. But we'll talk about the Mavs another day. They're doing horrible right now. They're outside of the play-in. I want to say they're the 11 seed right now, if I'm not mistaken. Absolutely insane how far they've dropped. I mean, it's still close because, I mean, you win 2 games and they might be the 9 seed again. I don't have the standings in front of me. But it's just crazy how far they've dropped pre and post All-Star break. Absolutely insane. Okay, last night, Kevin Durant had his home debut for the Phoenix Suns against the Timberwolves. Had a very, very rough game. He started out 0 for 6. The announcers probably had to say at least 20 times that was his, I want to say second or third time ever starting out 0 for 6. Oh, Kevin Durant's never started 0 for 6 in umpteen years. Last time he started off 0 for 6, he was on the Thunder. Like, they probably said that at least 10 times throughout the game. Finished the game with 16 points, 5 for 18, 2 for 4 from 3. And honestly, he was just missing some normal shots. He was missing normal shots. It wasn't anything out of his norm. It was dribble pull-ups. It was some open threes. It was driving to the basket. It was fades. All normal stuff. Suns fans, I'm gonna keep it a bean. I don't, like I said, I should pull it up. Hold on. Suns fans right now, you're in 4th in the West. You're 41 and 35. I don't necessarily think you're going to take over the Kings for that 3 spot, but I'm going to keep it a bean. You really got nothing to worry about. Y'all look good. I think it was just waiting on Kevin Durant to get back. Yes, this first game was rocky, but from everything we've seen, when it comes to Kevin Durant bouncing back from injury, he bounces back and looks like Kevin Durant immediately. So I'm not worried about y'all. I did want to talk about the Timberwolves, though, because Karl-Anthony Towns is back after missing 50-some-odd games. And last night's game against the Suns was one of my first times I was actually kind of really watching. I was playing the game and watching, so I wasn't completely locked in. But this morning, I was like, well, let me see what his shot attempts were. I just really wanted to see how Cat looked on the floor offensively. Next time they play, I'm going to have to really pay attention to see how he looks on the floor defensively. But he was solid. And one thing I took away from that game was like, yo, sometimes I forget how great of a shooter Cat is. He was 5 for 10 from 3. He shot amazing against the Suns. The only issue, I guess I'll say, I'm gonna put issue in quotation marks, and I think it might be something they work through because, like I said earlier, he missed 50-some-odd games this season. They're going to need a couple of games to get him back and acclimated with the team, get the offense and defense a little more cleaned up. But the only hiccup or critique I can say I had with Cat's performance on the Timberwolves last night was and like I said, I watched all his shot attempts, makes, misses, all of it. Every single shot attempt started on the perimeter. Whether it was an actual 3-point shot itself, or even if it was a layup, it was off of a drive that started at the 3-point line on the perimeter. One of the things I would love to see the Minnesota Timberwolves implement more, and I know it's going to be difficult with Rudy and Cat on the floor, is to find ways to get Cat in the post more. Even if it's just a high post. He has a good post game. He's got the post fade. He's got a nice post hook. He's got some strength. And if he's playing the 4, he probably has a smaller body on him. If there's moments when Rudy's off the court and maybe you're playing Cat back at the 5 and Naz Reid is at the 4 and Rudy's on the bench, get Cat involved in the post and closer to the basket just to get some easy things going for him. I know he's an amazing shooter, Timberwolves fans. I get it. Y'all love to say he's the best big man shooter in the league. We might revisit that conversation this summer. But get him some easier shots closer to the basket. Y'all need to. I know it's going to be tough when Rudy's on the court too. I get that. But also, in the same breath, I want to say in y'all last 5, y'all are 4-1 in your last 5. Y'all 5-5 in your last 10. But I want to say specifically in the last 5 games, you're 4-1. So y'all hooping right now. Don't get me wrong. You're just dropped right outside of the guaranteed playoff spot. You're 7th in the West. But once again, like we said earlier, anything can change because you're only 1 game behind Golden State. Some non-actual game-specific news and just stuff I wanted to talk about around the league was, one, the announcers brought it up during the Timberwolves and Suns game, was this idea that the NBA-PA, if you haven't heard, recently put in the NBA-PA, the Players Association, and the owners /NBA are currently going through negotiations for their CBA, their collective bargaining agreement. If you don't know what it is, it's the agreement of how they base their contracts off of, right? One of the things that the players brought up was they want to implement some sort of rule that makes a minimum games played requirement for for NBA awards. So whether that be like All NBA or Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, MVP, those types of things, technically right now those awards, I should say, don't have a minimum game requirement technically. For example, though, to get these be the statistical leader, so like to actually lead in assists per game, points per game, rebounds per game, to be a stat leader, you do have to play and appear in 58 out of the 82 games in a regular season. I don't know what the number, they haven't really disclosed what the number is going to be, what number they're leaning towards, or if they even do it at all, what that number is going to look like for minimum games played for the awards. Honestly, I didn't realize the statistical leaders games played were so low with 58. Like, I get it a little bit, but the fact that we weigh so heavily scoring leaders, 58 do feel a little low because people be weighing heavily scoring titles, assist title, rebounding titles for big men. People weigh those heavily when you're ranking like all-time greats and getting into those conversations, the type of conversations I hate to have. I want to say it was Doris Burke who was the announcer during this game, and I believe she was talking about like, you know, playing around with the 55 to 60 games for these awards. I'm gonna keep it a bean. I feel like that's a little low to how many games you have to play for these awards. It's got to be a cutoff, especially because, at least to my understanding, these awards, not only this minimum games played parameter wouldn't only apply to MVP, Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, stuff like that, but like we said, the All NBA stuff. And to me, the All NBA stuff has a bigger, I guess I'll say, weigh on it, some more weight to it, because the contracts are so closely tied to whether or not a guy makes either an all-star team or an all-NBA team, because that's how you get into those supermax conversations. And even sometimes for some players, there's incentives built in to their contracts to make an all-star game and stuff like that. But the only way you can make a supermax is if you know, the most money you can make, them crazy 5-year, 290 contracts, those supermax money, is if you make those all-NBA teams, usually within, I want to say 2, maybe 3, but I want to say just 2 years before you sign that contract, you have to have been an all-NBA player. And I just think it'd be really interesting to see what the all-NBA landscape would look like, especially in this season, with so many guys in the games, either due to injury, load management, you know, just teams playing it safe, whatever the reason is. We're going to, when we do the All NBA teams, we do MVP. We'll probably do that next week when we closer to the actual end of season date. I'm going to say there's like 6-7 games left, so we got about a week and a half of basketball, regular season basketball. I think we'll really be surprised, because I've already started a little bit, to see how many guys wouldn't meet that 60 or 65 game threshold if they did it something like that for All NBA. I'm very curious to see how they handle All NBA this season, because like we said earlier, All NBA doesn't have a minimum game requirement yet. It might in the future, but it doesn't yet. So I'm very curious to see what they do, because guys like AD and LeBron, off the top of my head, I don't think have played 65 games. Off the top of my head, I might be wrong, but I don't think they have yet. So I'm very curious. That type of stuff, it intrigues me. I'll say that. It intrigues me. I'm very curious to see what they do. I feel like I've said I'm very curious 8 times. So we're going to move on to the next thing, because I feel like I'm rambling. Woj tweeted 3 days ago that D-Wade, Dirk, Pau Gasol, Tony Parker, Becky Hammond, shout out to her, and Greg Popovich are among some of the finals who've been elected into the Basketball Hall of Fame. We'll get the rest when the Final Four this weekend. But that's a really good Hall of Fame class. Wade, Dirk, Pau, Tony, and then shout out to Becky Hammond. That's a good Hall of Fame class. I'm curious to see and excited to see what the rest of that's going to look like. Kind of burying the lead here, but the straw poll was just released by ESPN today. So if you don't know what the straw poll is, let's just read on it together. To gauge where the MVP race stands with less than 2 weeks remaining in the regular season, ESPN asked 100 media members to participate in an informal poll that mimics the NBA's postseason award process. There's the breakdown for the votes of what votes count for what many points. So let's just scroll down and see how close it is towards the end. And Joel is leading the straw poll. I ain't gonna lie. I was very surprised when I saw this. After Joel sat out against Jokic, I'm gonna keep it a bean. I don't know exactly when they polled these members. And I will also say, I'm not 100% certain, but I don't think the same members that are polled, media members, that are polled for the straw poll are the same media members who have real votes that count for the awards. I don't think it's the same pool of players. I think there is some crossover, so this is kind of a good gauge maybe, but I don't think it's the exact same pool of media members. But 2 things I thought was interesting. This 790 to 788 would turn out to be the closest MVP race in history if it turned out that way. Like, absolutely insane. Another thing that's interesting, Jokic got more first place votes than Embiid, but because Embiid has so many second place votes, it puts him up by 2 over Jokic in terms of total points. Shout out to Giannis once again. I was surprised to see Giannis over 150 points lower than these two guys. I think he's really in this conversation. To me, he's in this conversation. Shout out to Luka. Shout out to Jason Tatum. One name that I was super surprised to see when I scrolled all the way down to the bottom was Jaren Jackson Jr. tied for third place. He got 1 fifth place vote alongside Devin Booker. Definitely surprised me a lot. But then it's also nice to see names like DeMontis Sabonis and SGA and De'Aaron Fox, Jaylen Brown. Some names that I feel like I haven't seen on this list ever before. It's nice to see him here. In terms of the MVP itself, I've talked about it at length. I'm honestly exhausted from the conversation, and I'm just ready for them to announce the award itself. Embiid plays Giannis, I want to say either on Sunday or Saturday. Giannis plays the Bucks tonight. So there's a lot of still good games and these MVP candidates going up against each other still. Technically, Jason Tatum is an MVP candidate. He ain't really in it to win it, but he's in the conversation. And I think if Giannis has a good game against the Celtics, it could, maybe move the needle for him a little bit. Like I said, I'm exhausted of the conversation. I just truthfully hope Embiid wins. But I see and would understand if Jokic or Giannis win in at the same breath. Some more news around the league. The Wizards, for some reason, are considering extending Kristaps Porzingis and Kyle Kuzma. According to Shams, Porzingis and the Wizards have been in serious discussions for a new deal in which he would opt out of his current $36 million player option for next season and sign a new long-term deal. The Wizards have dealt with a variety of injuries and setbacks this season, currently 34-42. They're at 11th place in the conference and have decisions to make about Kyle Kuzma as well. The Wizards can offer him a max of 4 years, $180 million if he opts out of his next year player option and just extends his deal. The deadline to reach such agreement is late June, so we'll see what happens there. Because of salary limitations imposed by the collective bargaining agreement on veteran contract extensions, Kuzma is on track to also decline his player option for next year and hopefully become an unrestricted free agent and restructure a new deal with the Wizards. Listen, it's cool. I just don't really understand what the thought process behind this is, right? Because Kristaps Porzingis played in 65 games this season, and they were 27-38 when he played. Kyle Kuzma played in 64 games this season, and they were 29-35 when he played. Both times sub 500. Just keep that in mind. And then Bradley Beal, who's missed the most out of those three guys this year so far, has played in 50 games this season, and they were 24-26 when he played. So only 2 games under 500. So maybe the Wizards are like, they believe if Kyle Kuzma, Kristaps Porzingis, and Bradley Beal was healthy and on the court for most of this, if not all of this season, they could at least be a 500 team. Which is cool. Somebody got to be a 500 team, right? And with the fact that they did just give Beal that crazy bag and that crazy stitcher, he's going to be there for a while. So you have to try to at least put a competent team around him to sell tickets and be a first round exit. For context, the Hawks and Raptors are also currently 500 in the NBA, and that would put them at the Hawks and Raptors, like I said, both 500 teams. So they're looking to battle for their 8, 9, 10 spot. The Wizards are this is a big if they go forward and sign these deals and give these guys the potential money that they could make, it would really lock them into that big 3 of a roster and maybe be able to put some ancillary pieces around them. But at the end of the day, at best, they'd be fighting for like a play-in spot, maybe the 6th seed, depending if some other teams are battling injuries and stuff like that. But it's not going to really catapult you to anything serious in the Eastern Conference. Shout out to the Wizards, though. I like Bradley Beal, though. Like, Bradley Beal's one of my guys. Me and my wife be watching him and him and his wife's vlogs on YouTube and stuff. So, like, I'm a fan of Bradley Beal on and off the court. So I wish him the luck. I want him to be able to succeed and, win some games. I enjoy watching his game. But from an organizational standpoint, this does absolutely nothing for the team. But it is what it is. It's their money, not mine. That's all I got for you guys today. I'm liking this style so far, and y'all seem to be watching it, so I'm going to keep it up. This style of, I just have a bunch of things I want to talk about. I'm going to put timestamps for each topic, and it might be a video with just 3 topics, or it might be a video today with like 6 topics and just a bunch of random stuff that I wanted to talk about. Coming up soon, like I said, probably sometime next week, we'll do awards and all that stuff, and that'll be a fun time. But I'm going to enjoy this Bucks and Celtics game because that starts in literally 7 minutes. I'll see you the next one. If you made it this far, you already know you're rolling as usual. My name's Hawk. I don't know if I said that. And I'm out. Peace.